Hi everyone, my name is Martin Wakens from Big Mountain Studio, and today I'm going to teach you a few different things. We're going to build this application, which is just basically an introduction page where you can sign up or log in, and I'm going to show you a few different things in doing this. First of all, how to use custom fonts, like I did here, different tools on how you can find good fonts that pair up together, that look good together for your app. Then I'll show you different things like how to create this faded look with a border in design time. You probably know how to do it in code, but there's a way to do it so you can actually see it in your storyboard editor as well. Then we'll cover different things. I'll show you some different animations, like when I click this button, it'll animate, and it'll also show a modal pop-up, which I've covered in other videos. So I'm not going to cover too much in detail on how to do that, but I'll show you how to create a pop-up with irregular shapes like this. And then we'll do different things like how to handle keyboards, different types of keyboards for password, to show the dots instead, and hiding the keyboard when you click off the modal pop-up. Okay, so let's get started with the first video, which will be actually creating this. Okay, let's get started. In this first video, we're just going to start setting up the project, giving it a background. We'll throw some labels on there, and then we're going to get some custom fonts to make it look better. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a background to this view controller here because it looks kind of plain, right? So let's get an image. We'll put it on there. And we're just going to make it the same size as the view. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to set constraints to all sides so it takes up the whole screen. And for an image, in order to add an image, you have to come over to this Assets catalog. And I have an image already picked out, and you might have noticed this image before. It's the image I use for my logo for my channel. And let's see. So let's set the image by coming here and just selecting it right there, my background image. Right now it's set to scale to fit. So it's going to, what that does, it's going to stretch out the image so it fits exactly these dimensions. But I don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want aspect fill. And what that'll do is it'll maintain the same aspect ratio that the image is actually in, and it'll also fill the whole image too. Like for example, if I choose aspect fit, this is the actual aspect of the image. The height and the width are maintaining the same ratio as the original image. But you notice it doesn't fill up the very top and the very bottom. So what I want to do is I want to extend the top and bottom to the edges. And so it's going to cut off the sides here, but that's okay. Just like that. So it did cut off the sides, but I want it to fill the whole thing, so that's okay. Okay, let's add some labels. I'm going to have a label up here for my header, and this will say Big Mountain. And let's extend that so it takes up the whole screen, or the whole width rather. And I'm going to increase the font size. Okay, it looks pretty good. 48 seems to fit, and we want it white. Just want to show you something real quick. When it comes to picking colors, you have two ways you can pick a color. And it depends on where you click on this selector. If you select over on the left side, it's going to pick this like color palette. So you can, you've probably seen this before. You can go around, pick different colors. If you have your RGB values, maybe you're getting it off the web or a hex color, you can just apply the hex color here or the RGB values, and it'll give you the color you want. And of course you have all the other different options that you can use as well. But if you don't want to use that, what you can do is click on these arrows over on the side, and you can pick some of these predefined colors that they have. Of course you have white, and then different grays and black. You also have your recently used colors, so you can pick one of those as well. For this, I'm just going to go with the white. Okay, we also need one more label for the word studio. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make this white. Make the word studio. And we'll also make this the same size. I want to make it the same size because when I use different resolutions for iPhones, I want it to accommodate different size text and to always be centered. So I know if I'm always going to be 20 from the edges, it'll always be centered. What I'll do is actually the 0, 0. I'm constraining to the margins, so the margins are the ones that are 20 points off from the sides. You notice if I uncheck this and use 20, it'll give me the same constraint. So I'm just going to stick with the margins for now. We'll leave these as 0. And for the top constraint, I'm just going to set that to 8. So it'll hug the top there. And we probably want to give it a height. This height seems to fit right now for this font size. So let's add that for now. And for Studio, we'll keep it right about here. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger, like that. And I'll make it, just round it off, make it 20. And you see here spacing to nearest neighbor. So it's actually 20 from this big mountain label right here. And for the height, we'll leave it, I'll just make it 25. Okay, I'm always clicking this update items of a new constraint. So when I add the constraint, it'll shift and move the label to the appropriate place. I don't have to do that. Another way to get around that is I can add 4 constraints here. And you'll notice that the label isn't in the right place because it's orange and it has these orange numbers here. Another way I can fix it is clicking on this button right here, update frames. This is new in Xcode 8.0. Okay, so it shifted it, put it in the right place. Now let's add a couple more things here. We want to add some text down here, which is the description of our application and what it does. So, well, let me just show you. If I add a label, and we'll make it white. And maybe I want the label to fill up this much. And for some sample text, we can just put in some, here is where you can describe your application. Welcome to my app. It does this, it does that. I hope it helps you out. Things like that. If you ever want to get some sample text, you can use the text view, which comes like preloaded with sample text. So I usually just grab some from here. Maybe we'll just add like this much. Copy that much from there. And then I just delete it. And then for my label, whoa. Let's get that back here. For my label, I'm just going to paste it in here like that. Okay, you'll notice by default the label is limited to just one line. And you can see that here in this property, lines 1. I could increase it to different lines till I get the amount that I need. But what I want to do is, because this is going to have to fit different screen sizes, resolutions, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to set it to 0. And what 0 does is it uses as many lines as it needs to fill up the existing label. So you see 3 dots here, so it's not, the font is too big. It's not fitting inside of there. So what I can do is if I want to have it scale down to the actual font, there's this auto shrink property, and it defaults to a fixed font size. So that means no matter how big this label is, it's always going to default to 17 points. Because that's what I have set, 17 points. Actually, if you look at this, this is perfect. This is exactly 17. It happens to fit exactly in this label. But here, just for demonstration purposes, I'll make this a little bit smaller. And then if I change this to minimum font size, what this means is the font will go all the way down to 9 points for it to fit. I can change this to 5 or 4, any lower number. But basically, it has to be a lower number than 17, because we know 17 doesn't fit, right? So I can keep bumping this up until I find the one where it doesn't fit, and it's 17. Okay, so if I change it to 16, it'll fit. Now, one of the things that I do when I give these tutorials and also when I design is sometimes I'll pick the smallest font size, which is the 4S, and I just pick it right here. The reason why I do this, well, first of all, when I'm making a video, it's so you can see the whole thing more easily. It's bigger. And also what I like to do too is for me it's easier to design. Well, actually what I do is I actually design on the SE, because the 4S it isn't really used anymore. It doesn't support the latest iOS, but you can still use it here to design with. So usually I design with the SE, because that's the smallest phone size that's currently out and it supports the latest operating system, which at the time of this recording is 10.1, iOS 10.1. So what I like to do is design to the smallest, and then I'm going to show you how to change everything so it'll fit like the 7 Plus or an iPad. We'll start with this right now, and then I'll show you how to scale the font in the next video. But for now, if you notice these fonts right here, they don't look too good, and they're kind of hard to see. So we're going to fix that. But first, what I'm going to do is we're going to work with custom fonts. Actually, before we do that, before I show you how to add custom fonts, I'm going to change one last thing. I want to add a blur behind this text so it makes it easier to read. And I'm going to use this one here, the visual effect view with blur. I always have a hard time saying that. It's a mouthful. I just call it the blur effect. So let's add the blur effect here. And as you can see, it makes whatever's behind it blurry. Very handy control. And let's resize this so it snaps into place there. And for this label, I'm going to cut it. And you'll notice the visual effect blur, the blur effect, has a view inside of it. So I'm actually going to put the label inside that view. And let's make the blur a little bit bigger. There we go. And the blur will be down here somewhere. Okay, this blur doesn't have any constraints, so let's add some constraints to that. And we'll make it 100 from the bottom. We'll snap it to the sides. And for the height, I'm going to manually set the height. Let's round it out to 150. I like to use nice round numbers. Okay, we'll update the constraints when I set it. Okay, there we go. And for the label, I don't want the label to hug the edges of the blur because it makes it harder to read. So now let's click on the label and there we go. It's snapping in place. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a margin inside this view that we're going to use right there. And then I'll just, it's 8 all the way around. So let's just set those to 8 all the way around. All right, perfect. Now let's go with a custom font. In order to do this, there's this website I love to use, fonts.google.com. And if you go there, you can browse different fonts that you might want to use. A lot of them are very beautiful fonts. And I'll just give you kind of like a quick overview of this. If you want to explore it later on your own time, you can. The first font that we want is for this one right here, this big mountain. So if you look at these categories over here, you'll notice there are, it's basically filtering. Serif, those are those little edges that you see off the fonts, for example. If we just uncheck these, it'll show all the serif fonts. And you see on this M, there's this little line at the very bottom. Those are called serifs. Same with on the H here, or on the I, or even on the bottom of the P, those little lines that stick out horizontally. Those are serifs. Sans serifs basically means, sans means without. So it's basically without serifs. And here's an example right here. You notice that this bottom of this M or the L or the A doesn't have any horizontal lines that go off of it. Display fonts, that's more what we were looking for. It's a font that is good with little text, and it's something that you might not want to use for a lot of text that the person has to read, because it may be a little bit harder to read if there's a lot of it together. But it's great for titles, and that's what we're looking for. Is we're looking for a display font. Oh, just to go over these other ones too. Handwriting, of course, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It kind of mimics someone's handwriting. And monospace, those are fonts that like you use in your code. Every single letter takes up the same amount of space, horizontal space. Like this M takes up the same amount of space as this I, takes up the same amount of space as this S and T. So let's go and look for a display font. There's one down here that I like, that I've used on a couple of my other websites. And I don't see it offhand, so I'm just going to search for it. Okay, this one is called, the one I'm looking for is called Yellowtail. You know what? Because it's not a display font, it's a handwriting font. There it is right there. All right, once you find the font you like, you can click on it here, and you can give more of a preview, see all the letters together. And there's something else that you might see down here. This is something I wanted to show you. Popular pairings with Yellowtail. What this means are these are suggested fonts that go well with Yellowtail. So here, this font is Yellowtail, but this is a different font right here. And the one that they're suggesting is called Open Sans Regular. And you can also choose different styles of Open Sans. Or maybe you want to see what Roboto looks like. So you just click on these different ones, and this font here will change. And you can see how they kind of go well together. You know, you have a title up here with some text down here. A lot of these, they're really cool looking fonts. But the one I'm going to go with is the original one, the Open Sans. Let's download these fonts. What I'm going to do is click on this plus, and it kind of creates like almost like a shopping cart, I guess you could say, down at the bottom here for selected fonts. I have Yellowtail right here. I can remove it if I want, and it gets rid of that shopping cart, but I'm going to add it because I want that font, and I also want Open Sans. So let's click on that. Okay, now I have my two font families selected, and let's download them now. I can just click this button right here to download. All right, great. Let's double click that and see what we have. Okay, here are the two fonts that were downloaded. Here's the Yellowtail, and there's the Open Sans. And you notice it has all these different styles. The style that I'm interested in is actually this light, Open Sans light. You can click on the ones to preview the ones that you want. So there's no sense including the files that you don't want. So I'm just going to pick the ones I do want and then add it to my project. Before I add it to my project, I just want to create a grouping here. I'll say fonts. I'm just going to put them in that folder there. Okay, so we want Open Sans Light. And make sure you click targets here. I'm not quite sure why that's not checked by default, but this basically, if I have a project that has, or if I have what's called a workspace that has multiple projects in it, I can specify which project I want it to be part of. But since we're only using single view application project, most of the time the demos, they only have one project. So just make sure that's clicked right there. Copy items if needed, and I'll add it right here. And then let's go grab our other one, Yellowtail, and let's add that. Copy items if needed, add to targets. Okay, good. So now you have both of your fonts in your project. If you click on them, you can also preview them again, just to remind yourself what they look like. Now from here, I can go into my storyboard, and now I can change the font. So what I have to do first is go to font, click on that little icon, and then change it to custom. And from here, you should see your new font in this list. And there it is right there, Yellowtail. Okay, it's kind of small, so reset the size back to 17. So let's increase that till it looks good. Whoa, too big, too big. There we go, that looks fine. And you notice here, we're going to have to make some adjustments because the G is getting cut off. So let's click on there and let's increase that till we can see the G. Right there. Oh, look at that. I think my clicking gets carried away. I click too fast in Xcode. Can't keep up. Alright, looks like it's about 76. Studio, I didn't pick a font for that. But we want to change this font. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change it to custom. And this was Open Sans. Okay, good. Now if I added the other styles, more styles would come up here. But since I only imported the light, that's all it's going to show. Now we're going to have to change this minimum font size because you see it's getting cut off. So let's decrease that till everything shows. Okay, there we go. Everything's showing. And you know what I'm going to do? Right now it's left justified. I'm going to make it a full justified so it's more evenly spaced. Now there's one last thing that you need to keep in mind when you're using custom fonts, and that is, well, I've had different experiences with this. I've noticed that when I run the application on my device, the custom fonts show perfectly. But from what I've read, you need to add the custom fonts to your info plist. So I don't know if that is, if it really is needed. Maybe you need it because if you're going through the App Store. But like I said, from my experience, when I deploy it to a device, the custom fonts are there. So just to be safe, I haven't tested this out with an application on the App Store. What we need to do is we need to add a new item to this info plist. So what you do is you come down here and you just go to the last line and then click a plus. And what we're looking for is fonts. If you just start typing in fonts with an uppercase F, you should see it here. Fonts provided by application. And there's nothing in here. But what you have to do is we're going to have two fonts. And you have to put the name of the font in here exactly as it appears in your project. So usually what I do is I just click on it a couple times until I can edit the name and just copy it, just to be safe. I don't trust my own typing. So come in here again. I'm basically hitting Command A to select all, and then Command C to copy. Come back into info plist. Okay, and that is how you add custom fonts. In the next video, we're going to continue building onto our storyboard. This big mountain is kind of hard to see, so we're going to add a drop shadow to it so it makes it easier. And we're going to add some buttons down here. But just to get started, this is how you add custom fonts to and use custom fonts in your project. Thanks for watching, and I'll include a link to the next video down below.